The twin suns of Vulcana Prime bled orange across the sky, turning the smoke that never left the atmosphere into rivers of molten gold. From orbit, the planet looked like a dying star that refused to cool, a furnace world wrapped in iron clouds and perpetual thunder. Every breath tasted of hot metal and grief. This was Terran Forge World 19, the beating heart of humanity's war machine, and the place the galaxy had learned to fear. Darius Venn stood on the lip of Foundry Crater 9, wind whipping the soot from his coveralls. 42 years old, shoulders already stooped from carrying ghosts. His left hand was more scar tissue than skin, the right still remembered how to tremble when no one watched. Below him, 10,000 meters of vertical abyss dropped into the primary smelter. Maglev rails glittered like spider silk, ferrying fresh ingots the size of city blocks toward the cannon yards. The noise was biblical, hammers the size of skyscrapers falling in perfect, merciless rhythm, each impact a heartbeat for a species that had forgotten how to sleep. He pressed a gloved thumb against the name tattooed inside his wrist. Elena, gone 6 years now. Gone the day the Vorak glassed Epsilon Eridani IV. The day he promised the Void he would build something that could reach across light years and make the burning stop. Today the Forge had visitors. They came down in a shuttle of living crystal, wings of light folding into themselves until the craft looked like a teardrop of frozen starlight. The galactic conquered had finally demanded answers. For 2 centuries humanity had produced weapons no empire could match. Rail lances that cracked moons, void shields that laughed at antimatter, the new Sunbreaker cannon that could ignite a gas giant from 1,000,000 kilometers. The conquered feared the technology. They wanted the secret. They thought it was schematics, alloys, forbidden science. They were wrong. Darius watched the delegation descend the grav ramp. 3 species. First came the Virelian trade prince, all silver filaments and compound eyes, draped in robes that cost more than most planetary GDPs. Beside him drifted a Kalid matriarch, 8 meters of translucent jelly and ancestral memory, her thoughts glowing soft turquoise with polite curiosity. Last walked the Myrani Warmind, 7 feet of obsidian carapace and plasma blades, the one species that had actually fought humans and lived. Its mandibles clicked once, a sound like breaking porcelain. They expected a sterile presentation, clean rooms, holographic blueprints. Instead, Darius led them straight to the edge of the crater. "Welcome to the line," he said, voice raw from years of shouting over forge noise. "You want to know where Sunbreakers come from, you walk it with me." The Virelian's filaments twitched, translating the human's flat tone into something between amusement and alarm. "Engineer Venn, our understanding was that we would observe controlled demonstrations. You'll see what you came for." Darius started down the switchback stairs carved into the cliff. Heat rolled up in waves that made the air shimmer. Try to keep up. Halfway down, the Kalid's glow dimmed. She was tasting the air, sampling molecules of soot and human sweat and something else, something that made her mantle contract in slow confusion. "There is pain here," she pulsed, thoughts brushing against Darius's mind like cold water. Old pain, woven deep. Darius didn't answer. He just kept walking. They reached the first platform where the ingot trains screamed past, close enough that the delegation felt the wind of their passage tear at robes and carapace. Laborers moved like dancers in hell, faces wrapped in breathers, eyes hidden behind soot-glass visors. No one wore rank. No one needed to. Every person here had lost someone or everyone. A woman stepped forward, maybe 30, hair shaved to the scalp and tattooed with orbital strike coordinates. She carried a plasma torch the size of a child. When she saw Darius, she snapped a tired salute with 2 fingers to the heart. "Line's hot, Chief," she called over the roar. "We're running 20% ahead of schedule. For Ramirez." Darius's throat worked. "For Ramirez," he echoed. The woman turned back to her crew and began to sing. It started low, 1 voice, then 10, then hundreds rolling up the crater walls like a tide. Not a work song, a dirge. Old Terran Spanish, words older than spaceflight itself. "No lors mas, mi niño, que tu padre volverá, con la luz de las estrellas en las manos quemará." "Do not cry anymore, my child, your father will return, with the light of the stars burning in his hands." The Virelian recoiled as though struck. The Kalid's glow flared white, then blood red. Even the Myrani Warmind froze, blades half unsheathed. Darius kept walking. He had heard this song every day for 6 years. It never got easier. They passed beneath a gantry where a massive hull plate, still cherry red, was being quenched in a storm of liquid nitrogen. Steam exploded upward in a roaring pillar. Through the haze, they saw the name being plasma etched along the armor's spine in letters 20 meters tall. "Maria Eliane VNN." Never again. Darius stopped. He didn't mean to. His legs simply refused another step. The delegation halted behind him, sensing the shift in the man like animals scenting lightning. The Virelian found his voice first, thin and reedy. "You name your weapons after the dead. Every single one," Darius said. He reached out and laid his scarred palm against the cooling metal. It was still hot enough to blister through the glove. He didn't move. "Sunbreaker 9 is Elena. 8 was my brother Caleb. 7 was Lieutenant Park, who held the line on Ganymede with 12 Marines and a broken radio. "We don't build tools here, Prince. We build promises." The Kaled drifted closer, thoughts brushing Darius like morning silk. "You fight with memory as your fuel. Memory's the only fuel that never runs out." Above them, the great hammer fell again. The impact rolled through the decking and into their bones. Somewhere far below, a choir of 10,000 voices answered the hammer blow with the next verse of the song. Darius turned. His eyes were red-rimmed but dry. "You still want the secret of human weapons." He gestured toward the abyss glowing below. "Then come see where the fire starts." They descended into the throat of the forge. The heat became a living thing, wrapping around limbs, pressing against eyeballs, trying to cook thought itself. Emergency klaxons moaned like lost souls. Sparks the size of ground cars showered from overhead rails. The air tasted of copper and ozone and old blood. At the bottom, the primary crucible yawned open, a lake of molten star metal 2 kilometers across. Around its rim stood the naming circle, a ring of blackened steel where every finished weapon received its soul. A crew was waiting. They carried a cannon barrel still glowing white, levitated on repulsor sleds. It was 30 meters long, massed more than a frigate, and beautiful in the way only terrible things can be. Workers in fire proximity suits guided it into the circle with reverent care, as though laying a body into a grave. One of them, an old man with a face like cracked basalt, stepped forward holding a simple steel plate. On it was etched a single name in fresh, shining letters. Jacob Park, age 9, died when the sky fell on New Kyoto. The old man looked up at Darius. Tears flashed to steam on his cheeks the instant they formed. "Permission to name her, Chief." Darius's voice barely carried over the roar of the crucible. "Permission granted, Master Sergeant." The old man pressed the plate to the barrel. Magnetic locks clicked. Plasma welders flared. The name became part of the weapon forever. Then every worker in the circle, hundreds of them, raised their right fists to their hearts and spoke as one. "Never again." The sound rolled outward, climbing the crater walls, shaking the sky itself. Somewhere far above, thunder answered. The Myrani warmine took one involuntary step back. Its combat protocols were screaming. Threat level unknown, emotional energy off the charts, recommend immediate withdrawal. It did not withdraw. Darius turned to the delegation. His shadow stretched long and black across the burning lake. "You asked why human weapons are stronger than anything the galaxy has ever seen," he said quietly. "It's not the alloy, it's not the math." He placed his scarred hand over his heart, right where Alina's name was inked into the skin. "It's because every gram of our hate passed through the fire of love first, and love burns hotter than any star." The Kalid's glow had settled into a trembling violet, the color her species displayed only when confronting something too vast to process. The Virelian opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. You turn grief into physics. We turn grief into tomorrow," Darius corrected. Far above, the twin suns finally touched the horizon, spilling blood across the clouds. In that dying light, the first true sunbreaker cannon rose on its maglifts, turning slowly so the name Jacob Park caught the fire and flung it back at the sky like a promise and a warning. Darius started walking again, deeper, toward the sealed vault where the real secret waited, the one no alien had ever been allowed to see. Behind him, the delegation followed, afraid to stay, more afraid to leave. And somewhere in the dark between heartbeats, beneath the roar of 10,000 hammers and the singing of the broken, something vast and quiet listened. The forge was just getting started. The vault door was older than the forge itself. It had been cut from the prow armor of the colony ship Mercy of Canaan, the first human vessel to reach Vulcana Prime 4 centuries ago. The hull plate still bore the scars of micrometeorites and the faded white letters of its original name. Someone had welded a simple iron cross to the center, small, almost shy, as though embarrassed to take up space among so much violence. Darius placed his palm against the cross. The door recognized the tremor in his heartbeat, the exact pattern of grief-coated capillaries in his scarred hand. Ancient hydraulics sighed like an old man waking from sleep. The vault irised open, exhaling air that smelled of candle wax and ozone. Inside was darkness lit only by starlight, not metaphor. Actual starlight. The chamber was open to the sky through a shaft that climbed 3 kilometers straight up the crater's throat. At night, the twin suns were gone, and the galaxy spilled across the opening like spilled diamonds. In the center of the floor stood a single object, a rough-hewn altar of black iron, 3 meters long, 1 meter wide. Upon it rested a book. Paper, real paper. The delegation stared as if it were a live nuke. The Kalid matriarch drifted forward first, her glow dimming to a reverent indigo. "You keep dead trees in your most sacred weapons vault." Darius didn't answer. He was already walking toward the altar, boots ringing on the polished deck. Every step echoed strangely, as though the chamber were much larger than physics allowed. He opened the book with the care of a man defusing a bomb. The pages were thick vellum, edges charred as if rescued from fire. Each sheet held a single name written in different handwriting, different inks, different blood. Some entries were fresh, the ink still wet. Others were so old the words had browned and cracked. The first page read in a child's careful block letters. Mom, I miss you. TIMMY age 7 new Kyoto orbital fall. 2531 below it in an engineer's precise hand. Dr. LISETT OKONKWOSHE taught me that mercy and justice can share the same blueprint. DVNN 2538 Darius turned another page. The Myrani Warmond leaned in despite itself, fascinated and horrified. The name there was written in Vorok script, the enemy's own language. Captain ZRETH of the Burning Crest, he had children, unknown human gunner, Battle of the Rift, 2540 the Warmind's mandibles parted in a hiss that might have been grief. Darius spoke without looking up. This is the ledger. Every life taken by a Terran weapon since the Exodus Wars. Enemy, ally, civilian, doesn't matter. Every soul gets written down. By the person who fired the shot if they lived. By their squadmate if they didn't. By a stranger if no one else was left. He turned another page. The paper was soaked through with old tears that had never quite dried. We don't forget, he said. We can't. Forgetting is how it happens again. The Virelian trade prince found his voice, thin with something close to panic. You catalog your atrocities. No, Darius said. We catalog our failures to protect. Silence fell, broken only by the distant thunder of the hammers far above. The Kalid extended a gentle pseudopod and brushed the edge of the book. Her glow flickered through 1,000 colors too fast to name. Your species carries its dead into the future like ballast. Ballast keeps the ship upright in a storm, Darius replied. He closed the ledger with a soft thump that sounded in that moment like a coffin lid. Then he did something the delegation did not expect. He knelt, not military crisp, not ceremonial, just a tired man letting his knees give out because they had carried him far enough. Forehead rested against the edge of the altar, eyes closed, lips moving without sound. The Myrani Warman's combat subroutines flagged the posture as vulnerability, threat nil. It did not understand why that made the moment more dangerous than any weapon. 30 seconds passed, a minute. The only movement was the slow drift of soot from the open shaft above, falling like black snow. When Darius spoke again, his voice came from somewhere lower than his throat. I was supposed to be on Epsilon Eridani IV that week, he whispered to the altar, to the book, to the dark. Conference on tidal stabilization. Alina begged me to stay home, said she had a bad feeling. I told her feelings don't survive in vacuum. His shoulders shook once, a laugh or a sob, impossible to tell. She kissed me goodbye anyway, said, come back and prove me wrong, genius. He pressed his scarred hand flat against the page that held her name. I never got the chance. Kalid's glow settled into a steady, morning silver. She understood now why the air in this chamber tasted of salt that had no business being there. Darius rose slowly, joints popping. You still want the final secret? He gestured toward a smaller door at the far end of the vault, barely visible in the starlight. Then come, but once you cross this threshold, there's no unseeing it. They followed because fear had become curiosity, and curiosity had become something perilously close to reverence. The door opened onto a catwalk suspended above an abyss. Below them stretched the memory forge. It was not a factory. It was a cathedral built inside hell. Thousands of workers moved in slow procession along glowing rails. Each carried a small steel urn no larger than a heart. At the end of the line stood a machine unlike any the galaxy had ever imagined. A lattice of silver and grief, part particle accelerator, part pipe organ, part confessional. Every time an urn was placed into its cradle, the machine sang, one pure note that climbed until it shattered into light. The light poured into a massive sphere of liquid metal suspended in vacuum at the center of the chamber. With every note, the sphere grew brighter, denser, more alive. The Virelian's filament stood straight out from his skull in horror. You are alloying your dead into the weapons. Darius's answer was soft. We're giving them a voice. He led them down the catwalk toward the sphere. Heat here was gentle, almost kind. The air smelled of lilies and burnt copper. At the control pulpit stood a woman in a simple gray robe, hair white though she could not have been older than 40. Her eyes were the color of deep space after the stars go out. She did not look up from her console when Darius approached. We're at 98% coherence, Chief. 2 more hours. Visitors, Sister Miriam, Darius said. The woman glanced at the aliens and smiled without warmth or fear. Then they're just in time for the birth. On the main screen, schematics of Sunbreaker 9 rotated slowly. Beside it, a second image, a little boy's school portrait, gap-toothed grin holding a hand-drawn picture of a spaceship. Jacob Park, age 9. Sister Miriam touched the screen with reverence. Jacob loved stories about knights, said when he grew up he wanted to build a sword big enough to protect the whole world. Her finger traced the boy's smile. We're giving him one. She pressed a key. The memory forge sang. It began as a whisper, 1,000 voices braided together. Mothers, fathers, children, soldiers, poets, farmers, people who had never held a gun but died anyway when the sky fell. The sound rose into a chord that had no name in any alien tongue. Light exploded from the sphere in a perfect, silent ring. When the glare faded, the liquid metal had become something else. A lattice of impossible strength threaded with veins of soft gold, the heart of the Sunbreaker cannon. Not merely powerful, alive. Sister Miriam turned to the delegation. Every sunbreaker carries a fragment of the ones we failed. Their resonance stabilizes the quantum casing. Their love focuses the lance. Their refusal to be forgotten is what lets us reach across 1,000,000 kilometers and burn the guilty without touching the innocent. The Myrani woman's voice came out cracked, almost human. You weaponize your mourning. No, Sister Miriam said gently. We weaponize our promise. Above them, the sphere pulsed once like a heartbeat. Darius looked up into the starlight falling through the shaft. Somewhere beyond the smoke and the fire, the galaxy turned, vast and cold and indifferent. He spoke so quietly only the Kaled heard him, her mind pressed close in shared sorrow. Sometimes I wonder why he lets it hurt this much, Darius said. Then I remember hurt is the only proof we were ever really here, and proof matters. Far above, the twin suns had set completely. In the perfect dark, the memory forge sang Jacob Park to sleep inside a weapon that would one day save 1,000,000,000 children who would never know his name. Darius turned back toward the vault door. There's one more thing you need to see, he said. The reason we'll never stop, the reason we'll never conquer. He led them upward, toward the night shift change, where 10,000 new voices were already gathering to take up the song. And high above the crater rim, unseen by any eye biological or mechanical, a single star flared brighter than it should have, just for a moment, as though something vast and quiet had looked down and approved. The night was young and the forge never slept. They emerged from the memory forge into the night shift. The crater had become a bowl of living constellations. Flood lamps the color of old bone lit the upper gantries. Below, plasma rivers carved molten sigils across the floor. The air itself seemed to breathe, slow and heavy, exhaling centuries of soot and lullabies. 10,000 fresh workers poured in through the arterial gates, boots ringing in perfect cadence. No one hurried. No one spoke above a murmur. They moved like pilgrims entering a church whose god had teeth. Darius led the delegation along the Sky Road, a suspended causeway that ringed the crater at mid-level. From here the scale was obscene. The half-finished hull of Sunbreaker 9 hung in its cradle like a cathedral carved from a mountain, ribs glowing dull red, every weld a prayer. The cannon's barrel alone was longer than the Virelian's personal yacht. A young man waited at the first checkpoint. Couldn't have been more than 20, face still soft with childhood, but his eyes were older than the planet. He wore the plain gray of an apprentice, sleeves rolled high enough to show the burn scars that climbed both arms like ivy. When he saw Darius he straightened, fist to heart. Chief, he said, voice cracking on the word. Section 7's ready for the resonance baptism. They asked if you'd carry the urn. Darius's breath caught hard enough that the Kaled felt it ripple through the air. He nodded once, unable to speak. The boy handed him a small steel cylinder no longer than a forearm. Etched on its surface in careful, childish script. Mara Elizabeth Cole, age 6, she wanted to see the stars up close. Daddy promised. Darius cradled it against his chest the way another man might hold a newborn. The metal was warm, not from the forge, from the hand that had carried it here. The boy Cole, his surname had to be Cole, looked at the aliens without fear, only exhaustion. She liked your people's light ships, he told the Kaled directly. Said they looked like jellyfish dancing. Drew pictures, his mouth twisted, half smile, half scream. Guess she'll ride one now. The Kaled's glow guttered like a candle in wind. She had no answer. They walked. Every 50 meters another worker paused to touch the urn as Darius passed. Some whispered a name. Some only brushed fingers across the steel and kept moving. No one needed to be told whose child this was. Grief is a language humans never needed translators for. At the baptism platform, a circle of 12 master smiths waited in fire proximity armor lacquered black. Their visors were raised. Every face was wet. No one bothered to hide it. Crying was just another sound in the forge, like hammers, like songs. The platform overhung the primary coil of Sunbreaker 9, a ring of superconducting magnets wide enough to park a city inside. At its center floated the cannon's heart, the resonance core they had watched being born below. It pulsed gently, gold veins flickering like slow lightning. Darius stepped forward and knelt again, this time in full view of 10,000 witnesses. He unscrewed the urn. Inside was not ash. There never was. Only a single lock of auburn hair tied with a faded pink ribbon and a photograph laminated against the heat. A little girl with her father's eyes, laughing on a swing set while a violet sunset painted the sky behind her. He placed both offerings into the cradle. Then he spoke not to the aliens, not to the smiths, but to the child who was no longer there, and yet somehow more present than any living soul. I'm sorry I was late coming home from work that day, Mara, he said, voice carrying across the crater on every loudspeaker because someone somewhere had opened the all-call without being asked. Daddy's gonna make sure no little girl ever has to be afraid of the sky again. He pressed the activation stud. The resonance core answered. It began as a hum, low and maternal, the sound a mother makes rocking a child to sleep. Then Mara's laugh, recorded somehow, pulled from a home video no algorithm should have been able to find, echoed through the coil, bright and unafraid. The gold veins flared sun bright. The entire hull of Sunbreaker 9 rang like a bell struck by God's own hand. Every worker in the crater, every single one, stopped whatever they were doing and placed fist to heart. The sound rolled outward in a perfect circle, climbing the walls, punching through the smoke, scattering night birds that had long ago learned to nest in the furnace winds. Somewhere in low orbit, a sensor satellite registered an energy spike it could not classify and simply logged, event horizon of unknown emotional origin. When the light faded, the core had accepted its new voice. Sunbreaker 9 was no longer a weapon. It was a guardian. Cole the father, the boy who would never be a boy again, walked forward on legs that shouldn't have held him. He placed his bare palm against the hull directly beneath the freshly welded nameplate that now read MARA Elizabeth. The metal was cool, as if it had decided not to burn him today. He looked up at the aliens, eyes shining like broken glass. "She's flying now," he said simply. Then he turned and walked back to his station, because the shift wasn't over and there were still promises to keep. The Myrani Warmind's combat frame was trembling, not from fear, from overload. Its empathy subroutines, designed only for threat assessment of enemy morale, had nothing to do with this. It clicked once, a small, helpless sound, and powered its weapons down for the first time in its adult life. Darius stood. The urn was empty now, but he carried it anyway, like a soldier carrying the flag of a country that no longer existed. He faced the delegation. "You keep asking how we make weapons stronger than physics allows," he said. "That was it. That was the secret. We don't make them stronger, we make them loved." The Virelian trade prince opened his mouth, perhaps to protest, perhaps to bargain, but no sound came. His filaments hung limp, drained of commerce. Sister Miriam appeared at Darius's side again, silent as smoke. She carried a small data slate. On it glowed a single line of text, fresh from the fleet comm buoy in orbit. "Incoming VORAK Armada. ETA 47 hours. They are coming for the Forge." Darius read it without surprise. He had known they would come eventually. The Vorak had lost too many fleets to human weapons that refused to miss, refused to kill innocents, refused to let the guilty escape justice. They wanted the secret too. Now they would see it up close. He handed the slate to the Myrani Warmind. The obsidian warrior took it with claws that suddenly seemed too large, too clumsy. 47 hours, Darius repeated. "That's how long you have to decide whose side you're on when the sky starts burning again." Far across the crater, the night shift began to sing. Not a dirge this time, something older, something defiant. It was a hymn Darius's mother had taught him on a porch swing in Tennessee, back when Earth still had porch swings and mothers who lived long enough to finish the song. "I am bound for the promised land, oh, who will come and go with me?" 10,000 voices braided into one, rising through smoke and fire, through grief and memory, through the cold dark between stars where something ancient and attentive listened without blinking. The Kalid matriarch's glow had settled into a color her species had no name for. She pulsed a single thought toward Darius, fragile as a soap bubble. "Your children die so that strangers' children may live. How do you bear it?" Darius looked at the empty urn in his hands, then up at the hull where Mara's name now burned gold against the night. He smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who had already died once and found the experience underwhelming. "We don't bear it," he said. "We pass it on, until the universe learns to be gentle." Above them, Sunbreaker 9 turned slowly in its cradle, catching starlight on a little girl's name, orienting its unseen gaze toward the edge of the system where death was already accelerating. The forge kept singing, and high in the dark, that single star flared again, brighter, longer, as though something vast had rolled up its sleeves. 47 hours. The night had just begun to fight. The war room was not a room. It was a cavern hollowed from the bones of the planet itself, a cathedral of basalt and grief 2 kilometers beneath the main forge. The walls wept slow tears of condensation that tasted of iron. The only light came from a single hololith the size of a city square, suspended in the center like a dying sun. Darius stood at the edge of the projection, coat scorched and hanging open, the empty urn of Mara coal still tucked under one arm like a child he refused to put down. Around him, the night shift commanders had gathered. No uniforms, no ranks, just soot-streaked faces and eyes that had forgotten how to blink. Sister Miriam stood to his right, white hair glowing faintly in the hollow light. Cole, the apprentice whose daughter now lived inside a cannon, stood to his left, hands clenched so tight the knuckles had gone bloodless. The aliens had been given seats. They had not sat down. The hololith showed the system in merciless detail. Vulcana Prime, a sullen ember, its moons blacked out under emergency stealth fields, the orbital yards dark and praying. Beyond the heliopause, 300 red icons bled inward, Vorak battle clusters, each one a cathedral of bone and plasma, each one large enough to crack continents for spite. They moved in perfect formation, the way only a species that had never known mercy can move. 46 hours, 11 minutes. A woman's voice came from the dark behind Darius, low, steady, the voice that had sung lullabies over open comm channels while colonies burned. Captain Amira Reyes, commander of what was left of the Terran Defense Fleet. She had come down from orbit in a drop pod that still smoked in the hangar. "They're running silent," she said. "No demands, no declaration, just the old song, arrive, glass, leave." She stepped into the light. Her left arm ended in a carbon fiber stump. The Vorak had taken the rest above Procyon. We have 9 Sunbreakers combat ready. 9 against 300 capital-grade bio-dreadnoughts. She looked at Darius. Even with the new cores, the math is ugly. Darius didn't answer right away. He was staring at one of the red icons, larger than the rest, shaped like a thorned cathedral wrapped around a black hole, the flagship. He knew its name without needing the transponder, the Scourge of Ash. The ship that had burned Epsilon Eridani IV. The ship that had killed Alina. Sister Miriam spoke into the silence. "The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away," she quoted softly, "but sometimes he hands you the hammer and tells you to get even." A ripple of tired laughter crossed the room. No one corrected her theology. The Myrani Warmind finally moved. It stepped forward until its obsidian face filled half the hollow, mandibles parted, tasting the air. "Your fleet is outnumbered 30-1, it clicked in accented Terran. "Your ground defenses are ceremonial. Surrender the Forge World. The conquered will grant sanctuary," Cole laughed. It was not a kind sound. "Sanctuary," he spat. "That what you call it when they herd the survivors into breeding pits." He took one step toward the 7-foot warrior. "My daughter's in that cannon now. You think I'm giving her to the things that turned her into light?" The Warmind's blades half deployed, then froze. Something in the boy's eyes was worse than any plasma lance. Darius raised a hand. Silence fell like a guillotine. "We're not surrendering the Forge," he said. "We're finishing the 10th Sunbreaker, tonight." Captain Ray's turned slowly. "The resonance core isn't ready. We don't have a donor voice. We do." Darius reached into his coat and drew out a small, scorched data crystal. He held it up between thumb and forefinger. The hollow light fractured through it, painting blood across his scarred palm. Alina's last message, recorded in the final minutes before the orbital mirrors opened and the sky caught fire. She had known. Somehow she had known. He had never been able to play it, not once in 6 years. Until now, Sister Miriam's eyes filled. She understood before anyone else. "Darius," she whispered. He met her gaze. "She always said she wanted to save the world. Looks like she gets her wish." No one argued. There was no argument left in the room. He walked to the central console and slotted the crystal. The hololith dimmed. Every light in the cavern died except one, a soft, amber glow from the speakers. A woman's voice filled the dark, calm, loving, terrified, but hiding it badly. "Hey, genius," Alina said, and the sound of her laugh cracked something open in Darius's chest that had calcified years ago. "If you're hearing this, I was right and you were wrong. Told you feelings survive vacuum." A pause. Static like distant rain. "I don't have much time. The mirrors are opening. I can see the beams charging, but I need you to listen, Darius, really listen." Another pause. Somewhere far away, a child was crying in the background. Then Alina's voice again, fierce now. "Don't you dare let this make you small. Don't you dare let it turn you into something that only knows how to burn. You build beautiful things, love. Build something that ends this. Build something that remembers my name when it saves the next little girl who's afraid of the dark. Promise me, Darius Van. Promise me on every star we ever wished on." The recording ended. For a long moment no one breathed. Then Cole, the boy who had just given his daughter to Cannon, stepped forward and placed his hand over Darius's on the console. "On every star," he echoed. One by one, every commander in the room followed. Hands stacked upon hands until the pile was a living thing, warm and trembling and unbreakable. Captain Ray's added her stump last, pressing it down like a seal. "Then we finish Sunbreaker 10, she said, "and we name her Alina." Darius couldn't speak. He nodded once sharp, the way soldiers do when words would only break them. The Myrani Warmind watched the humans touch each other and felt something shift inside its carapace, something no combat doctrine had prepared it for. It looked at the Virelian trade prince, who had gone very still, filaments drooping like wilted flowers. The Kalid matriarch's glow pulsed slow gold, decision. She drifted forward until she hovered above the console. A single pseudopod extended, touching the data crystal with impossible gentleness. "I will sing with her," the Kalid said. Her thoughts carried layers of ancestral memory, of oceans that no longer existed, of young who had been taken by predators wearing different faces. "My voice will braid with your mates, so that when the Vorak come, they hear more than one species saying no." The Warmind's blades retracted fully. A sound escaped it, half click, half sigh. "I was at the Battle of the Rift," it said. "I saw your ships ram Vorak dreadnoughts to buy civilians 30 more seconds. I called it madness." It looked at Darius. "I was wrong. I will fight with you." The Virelian opened his mouth to protest, trade agreements, neutrality clauses, profit margins, but the words died when he saw the humans weren't even looking at him anymore. They had already turned back to the work of ending nightmares. Darius straightened. The urn of Mara Cole he set gently on the console, next to Alina's crystal, two small objects that together weighed more than planets. 46 hours, he said. "We don't need to win. We just need to make them remember why they should be afraid of us." Captain Ray's grinned. It was not a nice grin. "Permission to light the sky on fire, Chief." "Permission granted, Captain. Light it so bright they see it from hell." The hololith flared back to full brightness. Red icons crept closer. but now, threaded through the Terran defense grid, 10 golden signatures began to pulse, 9 complete sunbreakers, and one still forming, growing brighter with every heartbeat. In the memory forge 2 kilometers below, the night shift had already begun to sing Alina's name. And somewhere beyond the edge of sight, where physics gave way to mystery, something vast and quiet leaned a little closer to the light. The forge was awake. The promise was coming due. And the Vorak had no idea what kind of fire they had walked into. 39 hours. The forge had become a single living organism with 10,000 hearts beating in perfect synchrony. Sleep was a rumor no one bothered to repeat. Food came in protein bricks passed hand to hand along the line. No one stopped working long enough to chew. The twin suns rose and set unnoticed, swallowed by smoke that now glowed from within, lit by the white-hot fury of a species that had decided dying was acceptable but surrender was not. Darius had not left Foundry Crater 9 in 31 hours. His coveralls hung on him like a shroud, held together by dried blood and sweat. Soot had worked its way into every crease of his skin. When he blinked, black tears traced down his cheeks. He stood on the primary gantry above Sunbreaker 10's cradle, directing the final assembly with hand signals because voice comms had gone hoarse hours ago. Alina's core was singing, not metaphor. The resonance lattice, still half liquid, half light, pulsed with her voice, her laugh, the exact cadence of her breathing the night she recorded the message. Every time the lattice flared, the entire hull answered with a low maternal thrum that made grown men weep openly and kept working anyway. Below him, Cole, 19 years old and already a widower of both wife and child, guided a repulsor sled carrying the final focusing array. The boy moved like someone who had nothing left to lose and therefore could not be stopped. When the sled locked into place, he looked up at Darius and raised 2 fingers to his heart. Darius returned it. No words. None were needed. Sister Miriam appeared at Darius's elbow, carrying a steel chalice filled with water from the condensation tanks. It was the closest thing to holy water the forge possessed. She pressed it into his hands. "Drink," she ordered. "Alina will be furious if you die of dehydration before she gets to save the world." He drank. The water tasted of rust and mercy. Across the crater, the alien delegation had not left. They had tried once. The Virelian prince had attempted to retreat to his shuttle, muttering about diplomatic immunity and market volatility. The workers simply closed ranks, silent, polite, immovable. 10,000 soot-black faces forming a wall of grief-turned weapon. The prince had backed down. Now the 3 aliens worked alongside humans, because there was no other place in the universe they could stand without feeling like cowards. The Kalid matriarch, her name, Darius had learned, was Thalira, floated above the cannon's throat, her translucent body threaded with cables of living light. She was singing in frequencies no human throat could produce, weaving her ancestral memory into Alina's lattice. Every time her voice braided with Alina's recorded laugh, the core flared brighter, gold turning to white, white turning to something the sensors refused to name. The Myrani Warmind designation Kreshvor, Blade of the Final Dawn, had taken station at the defense grid console, its obsidian claws dancing across controls never designed for its species. It had already rewritten half the targeting algorithms, muttering in clicks about honor through precision. When a human gunner asked why it cared, Kreshvor had answered without looking up, "Because your dead deserve better aim than mine ever gave them." Only the Virelian still stood apart, filaments twitching with calculations of profit and loss. But even he had rolled up his silken sleeves and was ferrying coolant rods with the rest. Greed, it turned out, could be negotiated with when extinction was the alternative. 33 hours. The Vorak entered the outer system. They came in silent, running dark, bioluminescence dimmed to predator black. 300 capital ships and 1,000 escorts, a tide of living bone and plasma veins. Their psychic choir, millions of Vorak minds braided into one hateful song, washed ahead of them like a bow wave of despair. On Vulcana Prime, every child under 10 was already in the deep shelters. Every civilian who could not carry a welder or a rifle had been evacuated to the far side of the planet. What remained were the ones who had chosen to stay, the ones who had already died inside and simply refused to lie down. In the war cavern, Captain Reyes watched the tide approach on the hololith. Her remaining fleet, 47 ships that had survived too many last stands, formed a thin golden line between the Forge world and oblivion. She opened a channel to the alien delegation, voice steady as bedrock. "Thalira, Kreshvor, Prince whatever your name is, welcome to the human concept of diplomacy. We call it Tuesday." Then she turned to Darius, 2 kilometers away but close enough in spirit to touch. "Chief," she said, "your wife's ready to meet her killers. Give her a kiss for me." Darius looked down at the cannon that now carried Alina's heartbeat. The hull was complete. The nameplate had just been welded on, letters still glowing. "Eliane Mercy VNN Command C." He leaned over the railing and pressed his forehead to the metal. It was warm, alive. "I love you," he whispered. "Go loud." Then he straightened and gave the only order that mattered. "Light the forge." Every hammer in Foundry Crater 9 fell at once. The impact was seismic. The planet itself seemed to stagger. From orbit it looked as though Vulcana Prime had grown a second sun, white, furious, and singing in a woman's voice. Sunbreaker 10 rose from its cradle on pillars of plasma fire, 30,000 tons of grief made manifest. Its barrel unfolded like a flower made of judgment. The resonance core at its heart reached critical harmony and held, stable, perfect, impossible. Across the system, the other 9 Sunbreakers answered the call. They rose from their berths on moons and orbital docks, turning as one to face the incoming tide. Captain Reyes smiled like a wolf. "All stations," she said calmly, "fire at will, and God have mercy on their souls because we're fresh out." The first lance spoke. It was not light, it was not energy, it was memory given velocity. Sunbreaker 10, Elena, reached across 4 light seconds and touched the Vorok flagship Scourge of Ash with a finger of white fire that remembered every child who had ever screamed while a planet burned. The bio-dreadnought did not explode. It simply ceased, unmade down to the last cell, as though it had never been real. The psychic backlash of 3 million Vorok minds dying at once rolled across the fleet like a scream heard underwater. The Vorok hesitated. For the first time in recorded history, the Vorok hesitated. On the gantry, Darius watched the hololith bloom with golden lances. Each Sunbreaker fired only once every 90 seconds, cooldown imposed by physics and grief, but every shot erased a capital ship from existence. Not destroyed, erased, as though the universe itself had decided those lives were a mistake. 27 minutes into the battle, the Vorok tried to retreat. They never made it past the orbital line. Captain Reyes gave no quarter. She did not need to. The cannons were not weapons of war. They were weapons of witness. When the last Vorok ship tried to jump to hyperspace, Sunbreaker 10, Elena reached out one final time. The lance crossed the distance in a heartbeat and kissed the fleeing dreadnought on its stern. The ship did not die. It unfolded. Bone became petals. Plasma became light. The psychic choir that had sung only hate for 10,000 years suddenly found a new note, something like awe, something like forgiveness, and sang it for one perfect second before dissolving into starlight. Silence fell across the system. In the war cavern, no one cheered. They simply bowed their heads and cried, because victory tasted like ashes and every lost child was still gone. Darius stood on the gantry long after the firing stopped. The smoke was clearing for the first time in days. Actual starlight touched the crater floor, painting Elena's name in silver. Thalira drifted to his side, her glow soft now, almost human. "Your mate," she pulsed gently. She was beautiful. Darius nodded. He could not speak. Kreshvor approached, blades sheathed, carapace scarred with new burns earned defending a human gun crew. "I will carry this day in my honor markings until I die," the warrior said. "Your species, you do not fight to win. You fight so that no one ever has to fight again." The Virelian prince said nothing. He was on his knees, robes soaked with someone else's blood, staring at the sky as though seeing it for the first time. Far above, the 10 Sunbreakers hung in formation, silent now, guarding a world that no longer needed guarding tonight. Darius looked up at the stars, really looked, and felt something vast and quiet looking back. He smiled, small and tired and true. "Never again," he whispered. And somewhere in the dark between galaxies, something that had never blinked before closed its eyes in satisfaction. The battle was over, but the forge was just beginning to speak. The silence after the battle was worse than the noise. For 31 hours the forge had screamed, hammers falling like the heartbeat of an angry god. Now the great crucibles cooled with slow, wounded sighs. The sky above Foundry Crater 9 was clean for the first time in living memory. No smoke, no plasma exhaust, only the hard white light of the twin suns and the cold glitter of a battlefield that had been scrubbed from existence. Darius walked the crater floor alone. Sunbreaker 10, Elena, rested on her landing struts like a sleeping cathedral, hull still warm, nameplate glowing faintly with residual resonance. The other 9 cannons had already been towed to their berths, but Elena stayed here, grounded as though she refused to leave him again. He reached the foot of the barrel and laid his scarred palm against the metal. It pulsed once, gentle, the way Elena used to touch his cheek when he woke from nightmares. "I kept the promise," he whispered to the cannon, to the woman inside it, to the sky. "They won't hurt anyone else, not with you watching." No answer came, only the wind moving across the empty crater and the faint, distant sound of 10,000 people beginning to weep all at once. Because victory had come and the dead were still dead. He did not know how long he stood there. Long enough for footsteps to approach, soft, deliberate, alien. Thalira lowered herself until her mantle brushed the soot-blackened ground. Her glow was dim, almost shy. Behind her drifted Kreshvor, blades folded tight against its back like a penitent knight. The Virelian prince followed at a distance, robes torn and soot-stained, no longer glittering. None of them spoke at first. There was nothing the galaxy's languages had been built to carry. Finally, Thalira extended a single pseudopod and rested it, not on Darius, but on the hull beside his hand. The contact sent a ripple through Elena's resonance lattice. The cannon's running lights flickered once, gold to violet and back again, as though 2 voices had greeted each other across species and death. "Your mate recognizes me," Thalira pulsed, wonder threading her thoughts. "She thanks me for singing with her." Darius's throat closed. He managed a nod. Kreshvor stepped forward and did something no human had ever seen a Myrani do. It knelt. One clawed knee sank into the ash. Its obsidian head bowed until the horns scraped the ground. I have killed millions in my life, the warrior said, voice raw from shouting fire orders in a human war room. I thought it was duty. Today I learned the difference between duty and honor. It placed one massive claw over its chest, directly above the new scar it had carved there, an imperfect copy of the human fist-to-heart salute. Your dead have made me better than I was. I will carry that debt until my shell cracks. The Virelian prince said nothing for a long time. Then, very carefully, he removed the jeweled torque that marked him as 17th heir to the Sapphire Consortium. He laid it on the ground in front of Alina's landing strut. I came to buy your secrets, he said, voice thin and trembling. I leave bankrupt. You cannot buy what was paid for in children. He looked at Darius with eyes that had finally stopped calculating. Tell me how to repay. Darius had no answer. He was too tired for answers. Instead, he sat down right there in the soot, back against Alina's warm hull, and let his head fall into his hands. The alien sat with him, Thalira folding her mantle like a blanket, Kreshvor curling its bulk protectively, the prince simply folding his legs beneath him like a child at story time. 4 species, 1 grief. Above them, workers began to emerge from the shelters. They moved slowly as though the gravity had doubled. Some carried small steel urns. Others carried nothing but empty hands and eyes that had seen too much sky. Cole was among the first. He walked straight to Darius and sat beside him without asking permission. The boy, 19 years old and ancient, rested his head against the same hull plate that held his daughter's name. She did good, Cole said quietly. Mara, I felt her when the last ship unfolded. She laughed. I heard it. Darius reached out blindly and found Cole's hand. They held on like drowning men. More came, hundreds, then thousands. They did not speak. They simply sat in widening circles around the cannon that had ended a war in 31 minutes, touching the hull when they could, touching each other when they couldn't. A silent congregation of the bereft and the redeemed. Sister Miriam arrived last, carrying the ledger, the great book of names from the vault. She laid it open on the ground in front of Alina's prow. The newest page was still wet. Yeline Mercy VNN, SAVD 11.7 billion lives never again below it, in Thalira's careful, luminous script. Thalira of the deep memory sang with a human woman so that children might sleep. I will sing again if asked, and beneath that, carved deep with a combat claw. KRSHVOR, blade of the final dawn fought beside humanity, and found a soul dead eternal. The Virelian prince added his own line in shaking trade glyphs. I was blind. Now I owe interest, owe insight. No one told them to do it. No one needed to. Night fell. The twin suns bled out across the horizon, and for the first time in centuries the stars were visible from the crater floor, sharp, merciless, beautiful. Someone began to sing, not a dirge, not a hymn of triumph, just an old song about going home. One by one, voices joined. Human, Kalid harmonics, even Kreshvor's subsonic clicks weaving a bass line that rattled bones. The Virelian's thin, reedy tenor surprised everyone, including himself. Darius did not sing. He only listened, forehead against Alina's hull, feeling the faint thrum of her core answering the choir like a second heartbeat. Hours passed. The song changed, became something new, something that had never existed before tonight and would never exist again. A requiem and a lullaby braided together. When it ended, the silence was gentle. Sister Miriam closed the ledger with reverent hands. The war is over, she said simply. But the promise is. She looked at Darius. He understood. He stood, legs trembling, spine cracking, and faced the thousand sitting in the ash. Thalira rose beside him. Kreshvor unfolded to its full height. Even the prince stood, torque still lying in the dust where he had left it. We're decommissioning the Sunbreakers, Darius said. His voice carried without amplification. The crater itself seemed to listen. Not scrapping, decommissioning. Their work is done. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Confusion, fear, grief. Darius raised a hand. Starting tomorrow, this forge builds something else. He placed his palm against Alina's hull one final time. We're going to turn every cannon into a colony arc. Every resonance core becomes a terraforming heart. We're going to take the voices of our dead and seed dead worlds with life. We're going to make sure no child anywhere ever has to be afraid of the sky again. He looked at Thalira, at Kreshvor, at the prince whose name he still did not know. You're all welcome to stay and help, or you can go home and tell the galaxy what you saw here. Thalira's glow flared brilliant gold. I will bring my people, she said. We have forgotten how to dream. You will teach us again. Kreshvor slammed one fist against its chest, the Myrani oath of eternal service. I will bring warriors who wish to become builders. The prince picked up his torque, looked at it, and gently set it down again. I will bring ships, he said. Many ships and no invoices. Cole stood up beside Darius, soot-streaked and unafraid. I'll run the first crew, he said. Mara always wanted to see the stars up close. Darius looked out over the sea of faces, human, alien, grieving, hopeful, and felt something vast and quiet settle into place inside his chest like a key turning in a lock that had waited centuries. took one step forward and spoke the only words left. Then we begin. Far above, in the perfect dark between stars, something that had watched the birth of galaxies and the death of suns allowed itself the smallest of smiles. The forge fires cooled, but something new was already kindling. And somewhere, a woman named Alina Ven laughed in delight inside a heart of starlight because the promise had just grown wings. 3 months later, Vulcana Prime no longer looked like a wound. The smoke was gone. The twin suns rose into a sky, so clean it hurt to look at. The great crucibles had been slagged and recast into vast, gentle domes, greenhouses that drank the heat of the planet and exhaled oxygen. Where hammers once fell like the wrath of God, irrigation pipes now sang soft water songs across fields of newborn wheat. Children, human, Kalid spawnlings, even a handful of Myrani larvae in protective shells, ran between the rows chasing reconstructed butterflies that had never existed on this world until yesterday. The sunbreakers were gone from the sky. They had become something better. Darius stood on the rim of what used to be Foundry Crater 9. The abyss had been terraced into 7 vast, descending gardens. At the bottom, where the memory forge once burned, a lake now reflected the stars, clear, deep, and impossibly blue. In its center rose the first arc, Sunbreaker 10 reborn, hull plating replaced with transparent diamondoid, resonance core now a golden sphere that pulsed like a slow heartbeat. The name Elena Mercy Venn still glowed along her flank, but beneath it, new words had been added in 100 scripts. First seat of the Remembrance Fleet, may every world SHETOUCHES. No peace. Cole stood beside him, no longer an apprentice gray. He wore simple green, the color of new growth, and carried a small child on his hip, a Kalid infant whose bioluminescent spots flickered in delighted patterns every time Cole bounced her. Her name is Marathel, Cole said, grinning the way only people who have survived the unsurvivable can grin. Thalira insisted, said it was only fair. My daughter saved her people, now hers gets to ride in my arms. Darius ruffled the infant's mantle. She cooed and tried to eat his finger with a mouth that had no teeth yet. Below them, the loading ramps were open. Families walked aboard, refugees from a dozen shattered worlds, colonists who had never owned more than the clothes on their backs, veterans who had forgotten how to live without a rifle in their hands. They carried no weapons, only seeds, books, musical instruments, and small steel urns containing locks of hair or scraps of cloth from someone they had lost. Every urn would be placed in the new resonance gardens aboard the Ark. The voices of the dead would help terraform dead planets into living ones. The promise kept growing. Sister Miriam appeared on the path, white hair now braided with living vines. She carried the ledger, not the great iron-bound tome anymore, but a smaller version bound in soft blue leather. It was already half full again, but the entries were different now. Elena Mercy Venn planted first tree on New Terra. SDARDAT 2543.117 SHE is still saving US. Darius took the book and turned to a fresh page. He wrote with a steady hand. Today I watched a Myrani warrior teach a human child how to plant corn. The universe is healing. DVNN Kreshvor strode up the path, its obsidian carapace now etched with delicate silver vines, living metal that had been grafted by human smiths and Kalid bioweavers working together. It carried a crate of seedlings on one shoulder as though it weighed nothing. I have been reassigned, the warrior announced with solemn pride. My clutch mates tried to execute me for treason. The conquered overruled them. I am now permanent liaison to the Remembrance Fleet. It set the crate down and very carefully knelt so the Kalid infant could climb onto its back. Marathel squealed in delight and wrapped her tiny pseudopods around one horn. Cole laughed. You're babysitting now, Blade of the Final Dawn. I am guarding the future, Kreshvor corrected. There is no higher honor. From orbit, a shadow fell across the gardens, gentle, not ominous. The Virelian prince's personal yacht, once a gaudy thing of gold and excess, had been stripped and repainted simple white. It descended on quiet gravitics and settled beside the Ark like a repentant swan. The prince, no longer wearing a torque or title, walked down the ramp carrying a single potted sapling. Its leaves shimmered with the colors of old Earth oceans. I bankrupted 3 consortia to buy this, he said without preamble. A cutting from the last living tree on Viral Prime. My people forgot how to grow things that weren't profit. He offered it to Darius with both hands. Consider it interest on a debt that can never be repaid. Darius accepted the pot. Their fingers brushed scarred human skin against silver filaments that no longer twitched with greed. Thank you, Prince. Just Callian, the Virelian said quietly. Titles feel heavy now. Thalira arrived last, descending from the sky in a spiral of light. Her body had changed, where once she was translucent jelly, now threads of gold and green pulsed beneath her mantle, gifts from the resonance gardens. She carried something small wrapped in living kelp. For the ship's heart, she said, offering it to Darius. Inside was a single seed, glowing softly, braided from Kalid neural coral and human DNA taken from the locks of hair in the memory forge. When planted in the Ark's central garden, it would grow into a tree whose fruit would sing in the voices of every child ever lost. Darius cradled it like the most fragile explosive in the universe. Captain Amira Ray's voice crackled over the all-call, warm and tired and alive. Chief, we're ready to launch on your mark. First destination, New Kyoto, the world where Jacob Park and Mara Cole were born. We're taking them home. Darius looked out over the gardens one last time. Thousands had gathered on the terraces, humanity's survivors and humanity's newest friends. They stood together without segregation, without fear. Someone had started singing the old hymn again, the one about the promised land. Others joined, voices rising until the crater itself seemed to breathe with them. He raised the seed above his head. On behalf of every name in the ledger, he said, and his voice carried to every corner of the planet, to every ship in orbit, to every listening star, we go to make the universe kind. The Ark's ramps closed. Engines that had once been built to burn now hummed with the soft power of creation. Lena's core pulsed once, bright, welcoming, maternal. Darius boarded last. As the great ship rose, the resonance gardens flared to life. Every tree, every vine, every blade of grass planted by grieving hands began to glow. From orbit it looked as though Vulcana Prime had grown a halo. In the central garden, the new seed took root instantly. A sapling burst upward, leaves unfurling in perfect golden ratio, fruit already forming, small orbs of light that sang in children's voices. Mara Cole laughed first. Jacob Park joined her. Then thousands more, a choir of the once lost, now eternal. Darius stood at the forward viewport as the Ark slipped into hyperspace. Behind him, Cole held Marathel while Kreshvor stood guard. Callian watered the first Violian tree with shaking hands. Sister Miriam opened the new ledger and began to write. Ahead of them, the stars no longer looked cold. Somewhere in the dark between moments, something vast and quiet watched the ship of remembrance accelerate toward wounded worlds, carrying life where once it had carried death. And for the first time since the universe learned to weep, it felt the balance tip toward mercy. The forge had become a garden, and the garden was leaving home to seed the stars. The stars blurred into rivers of light as the Remembrance Arc, once Sunbreaker 10, now simply Alina, cut through hyperspace like a needle threading forgotten wounds. Inside her diamondoid hull, gardens bloomed in impossible abundance. Vines climbing bulkheads, flowers unfurling in zero-G pockets, trees whose roots drank from recycled tears, and whose leaves whispered lullabies in dead languages. The air smelled of rain on new soil, of bread baking in communal ovens, of hope that had been forged in fire and refused to cool. Darius walked the central corridor, boots silent on moss-soft decks. He had not slept since launch, 3 days by ship time, eternity by grief measure. His scarred hands traced the walls, feeling the faint pulse of the resonance core at the ship's heart. Alina's voice hummed there, braided with Thalira's harmonics and Mara Cole's innocent giggle, a symphony that stabilized the warp fields and kept nightmares at bay. In the hydroponics bay, Cole knelt among seedlings, teaching Marathel to pat soil with her tiny pseudopods. The Kalid infant's glow flickered in delighted blues and greens, matching the sprouts she touched. Kreshvor loomed nearby, its obsidian frame surprisingly gentle as it held a watering can fashioned from salvaged cannon casing. Gentle now, Cole murmured, like this. Plants are like us, they need care to grow strong. The Myrani warrior tilted its head. In my culture, we crush what is weak, here you nurture it. It extended a claw and with precision that could split atoms, adjusted a leaf. Fascinating, terrifying. Darius paused in the doorway, watching. Cole looked up and smiled, small, real, the first unshadowed smile since the naming ceremony. She's taken to you, Kresh, Cole said. Thinks your horns are toys. The warrior rumbled a laugh that shook nearby pots. Then I am her guardian, let her climb. Marathel squealed and launched herself at Kreshvor's leg, wrapping around it like living jewelry. The Myrani did not move, only adjusted its stance to form a stable perch. Sister Miriam joined them, ledger tucked under one arm. She had been in the chapel garden, a small dome where the steel urns had been planted like seeds, their contents now growing into memorial groves. First bloom open, she said softly. Jacob Park's rose. It smells like summer on New Kyoto before the fall. Darius's throat tightened. He nodded, unable to speak. Callian, the former prince, entered from the opposite end, carrying a tray of Violian nectar fruit. His filaments no longer shimmered with wealth but with quiet luminescence, a gift from Thalira's influence. I have recalculated our course, he announced. We arrive at New Kyoto in 7 hours. The terraforming arrays are primed. Alina's core will sing the world awake. The group moved as one to the observation lounge, a vast viewport that wrapped the ship's bow. Stars streaked past, but ahead a faint glow began to resolve. The shattered remnants of New Kyoto, a world glassed into obsidian plains and poisoned seas. Thalira drifted in last, her mantle trailing vines from the gardens. She pulsed a thought that brushed Darius's mind like warm current. My people come. 3 colony ships. They bring water from our deepest oceans and memories from our oldest songs. Darius placed his hand on the viewport. Then we begin. 7 hours later, orbit. New Kyoto hung below like a scar on the galaxy's skin, continents fused into black mirrors, atmosphere choked with fallout that still glowed faintly green. No life stirred, no wind moved the ash dunes. It was a grave world, silent and accusing. The Alina descended first, gentle as a falling leaf. Her resonance core extended invisible tendrils, quantum roots that burrowed into the crust, seeking the planet's wounded heart. When contact was made, the ship sang, not a weapon's roar, a mother's whisper. Alina's voice spilled across the surface, laced with Mara's laugh, Jacob's stories, the choir of 10,000 lost children. The obsidian cracked, fissures bloomed with light. From the ship's bays, seed pods rained down, each one carrying soil from Vulcana Prime, water from Kaled seas, minerals from Mirani forges, and trade secrets from Virelian vaults. The surface changed. Ash dunes stirred as roots punched through, green shoots unfurling in seconds. Lakes formed in crater basins, water clear and singing. Forests sprouted along fault lines, trees tall and strong, leaves shaped like human hands reaching for sky. The command garden, Darius watched the miracle unfold on holoscreens. Cole held Marathel close, tears tracing silent paths. "Look, little one," he whispered. "Your sister's home." Kreshvor's mandibles clicked in awe. "This is greater than any conquest. You remake worlds with grief turned gentle." Callion's filaments wove patterns of light, recording everything. "My people will trade for this knowledge, not for profit, but for rebirth." Thalira's glow filled the room, her thoughts a tide of gratitude. "We have seeded before, but never with such soul." But the miracle had teeth. As the forests grew, buried Vorak artifacts stirred, automated defenses left behind, sentinel drones that had slumbered for years. They awoke to the intrusion, plasma lances charging, targeting the ship and the newborn life below. Alarms wailed. The Alina shuddered as a lance grazed her shields. "Defenses online." Captain Reyes barked from the bridge, her voice sharp over comms. She had come aboard at launch, her stump now fitted with a gardening claw that doubled as a weapon interface. Darius gripped the console. "We can't fire back. The core's tied to terraforming." The drones swarmed dozens, their bone metal frames screeching hatred across open channels. One slammed into the viewport, cracking diamondoid, mandibles grinding for entry. Kreshvor roared and charged, blades deploying in a blur. It tore through the drone's hull, obsidian meeting bone in a shower of sparks. "The children," it bellowed. Cole shielded Marathel, but the infant's glow flared bright, defiant, weaving a shield of light that held the next drone at bay. Thalira pulsed a command to her incoming ships. They arrived in a cascade of crystal wings enveloping the Alina in protective fields, but the drones adapted, burrowing toward the surface forests. Darius made the choice in a heartbeat, the human choice. He ran for the core chamber, Sister Miriam at his heels. "The ledger," he gasped. "We need a new voice." In the heart room, the golden sphere pulsed frantically. Darius opened the ledger to a blank page and wrote with blood from a fresh cut on his palm, "For New Kyoto. For every world that hurts like we do." Darusvnn, who finally letsgo, he pressed his hand to the core. Alina's voice answered, soft, understanding. "It's okay, genius, I've got this." The ship sang again, not just Alina, but Darius now, his grief woven in, raw and resolute. The terraforming accelerated. Roots became barriers, vines lashed out like whips, trees grew thorns that pierced drone armor. One by one, the sentinels fell, not destroyed, but overgrown, encased in living wood, their weapons turned to fertilizer. The last drone hovered before the viewport, lances spent. It broadcast a final screech, then silence as flowers bloomed from its joints, petals unfurling in victory colors. The world below breathed. Oceans cleared. Skies rained clean water. Birds reconstructed from genetic vaults took wing for the first time. In the command garden, cheers erupted. Cole kissed Marathel's mantle. Kreshvor retracted its blades, scarred but unbroken. Callion wept filament tears. Thalira touched Darius's shoulder. "You gave yourself to the song." He smiled, weary but whole. "We all did." As the Alina rose, leaving behind a green and living New Kyoto, the resonance core settled into peace. The ledger closed on a new entry. The forge has become the garden, and the garden grows. Far ahead, the next wounded world waited. But for now, the stars sang back, and in the quiet vastness, something eternal nodded in approval, weaving mercy into the fabric of creation. The fleet grew, the promise spread, and humanity, broken and beautiful, led the way. 10 years later, Stardate 2553.21, for the galaxy no longer feared human weapons. It feared forgetting what humans had done with them. From the core worlds to the Perseus Veil, the Remembrance fleet moved like slow comets of green and gold. Once there had been 10 sunbreakers. Now there were 10,000 arcs, each one a cathedral of living memory, each resonance core singing in the voices of the lost. Planets that had been tombs for centuries now rang with children's laughter in 100 languages. Forests grew on moons that had never known rain. Oceans were born where only vacuum had ruled. And at the heart of the fleet, oldest and brightest, flew the Alina Mercy Ven, no longer a warship, no longer even an ark in the old sense. She was the flagship of a civilization that had chosen creation over conquest, grief over glory. Darius then stood on her observation bridge, older now, hair gone silver at the temples, scars softened by time and gentle light. The viewport before him showed a sight no human eye had ever seen until this decade, a ring of worlds orbiting a quiet yellow star, every continent green, every ocean blue, every sky filled with ships of every species that had once come to Vulcana Prime seeking secrets and left carrying seeds. They called the system New Canaan. They called the innermost world home again. Below, on the planet's surface, a ceremony was beginning. Cole, 30 years old now, broad-shouldered and calm, stood at the foot of the first tree. It had grown from the seed planted aboard the Alina on her maiden voyage, a single trunk of braided gold and living light, branches spreading wide enough to cast shade over an entire valley. Its fruit glowed softly, each orb containing a complete memory of someone who had died so that others might live. Marathel, 10 years old in human terms, luminous and tall, stood beside Cole in flowing Kaled robes. She held the hand of a small human girl with auburn hair and eyes the exact color of Alina's had been. The girl's name was Mercy Van Cole, born 2 years after New Kyoto bloomed, carried by a surrogate who had wept when she heard the name. Kreshvor stood behind them, its obsidian carapace now laced with living vines that flowered year-round. It wore no blades anymore. Instead, its forearms had been reforged into pruning hooks. A dozen Myrani young, once bred only for war, clustered around its legs, learning how to graft fruit trees. Callian, gray filamented but smiling, directed a choir of Virelian traders who had traded profit for purpose. Their voices rose in perfect, profitless harmony. Sister Miriam, white hair now flowing to her waist, held the final ledger. It was no longer a book of the dead. It was a book of the living. The last page had been waiting 10 years for today. Thalira drifted above the gathering, her body now a cathedral of light itself. Ancestral memories woven with human songs and Myrani drums and Virelian commerce turned to generosity. She pulsed a single thought that carried to every corner of the system. It is time. Darius descended in a small shuttle alone. When he stepped onto the grass of home again, the crowd, tens of thousands strong, representing every species that had once stood apart, parted in silence. Walked the path lined with memorial trees, one for Alina, one for Mara Cole, one for Jacob Park, one for every name ever written in blood and ash. Their fruit glowed brighter as he passed, as though greeting him. At the foot of the first tree he knelt, not in grief this time, but in gratitude. Cole offered a hand and pulled him up. Mercy Van Cole ran forward and wrapped her small arms around his waist. "Grandpa Darius," she whispered. "Mama says hi." He looked up through tears into the branches. There among the glowing fruit, one orb pulsed brighter than the rest. When he focused, he heard her, clear, laughing, unchanged by time. "Hey, genius," Alina said, the same words from the last message, now warm with pride instead of fear. "Look what you built." He laughed through the tears. "Look what we built." Sister Miriam opened the ledger to the final page and held it out. The quill was made from a feather of the first bird born on New Kyoto. Darius took it. He wrote slowly, deliberately, every letter carved deep. On this day, the promise is fulfilled. No child anywhere will ever again fear the sky. The forge has become the garden. The garden has become the galaxy, and every name we carried is now a living world. He signed it, Darius Michael, then last of the weapon makers, first of the world makers. Then he turned the page intentionally blank and wrote one final line across the top in letters large enough for the stars to read. The ledger is closed. The story is not. He set the quill down. The choir began to sing, not a hymn, not a dirge, but something new, a song of welcome, of arrival, of beginning again. Above them, the Alina drifted in low orbit, her golden core pulsing once, slow, maternal, complete. Then gently she began to dissolve, not destroyed, transformed. Her hull unfolded like petals, resonance lattice spreading into a ring of light that encircled the entire planet. Every arc in the fleet followed, dissolving into living halos that would seed the galaxy forever. Darius watched the ship that had carried his wife's heart become a permanent ring of dawn around a world called home again. Mercy tugged his hand. "Look, Grandpa," he looked. Across the valley, children of every species were running beneath the trees, catching falling fruit that burst into laughter and memory when they touched the ground. The sound rose like birdsong, like rainfall, like forgiveness. Somewhere in that bright chorus, he heard Alina laugh again, free now, unbound, part of everything. Cole rested a hand on his shoulder. "We did it, Chief." "No," Darius said, voice steady at last. "They did." He looked up one final time into the sky where the Alina had been. And for the first time in his long, broken, beautiful life, he felt no grief at all, only the vast, quiet certainty that something far older and kinder than humanity had been waiting for this moment since the first star learned to shine. The galaxy was no longer afraid, it was grateful. And somewhere in the perfect silence between heartbeats, the author of all things closed the book of war, turned the page, and began to write in green. The forge was silent. The garden sang forever, never again.